We stopped the attack, destroying the Panther and forcing the Tiger to retreat.
The Germans strike again and again, and the Canadians struggle to hold their ground. But just when their situation seems desperate, help comes roaring in from the skies.
The weather started to get better and the fighter bombers came firing rockets. The Typhoons were dangerous for us.
The Typhoons would range in above you, behind you somewhere. You'd have 20mm cannons. When they're converging on the target, then he lets go his rockets. And it's just a hell of a noise, and all you see is pieces. It'll break a Tiger or a Panther, break them to pieces. They were very helpful.
The Typhoons, or Tiffies as the tankers call them, stop the German advance with their rockets. But in battlefield chaos, anything can happen, as Canadian tanker Bill Luton recalls.
A sound was heard overhead unlike anything I ever experienced in battle. Something like the noise of a high-speed train passing through a tunnel. I paused in wonderment, and then heard an explosion. I looked up to see the Tiffy flaring away.
Luton and his crew are under attack by the deadliest tank killer on the battlefield. One of their own Typhoon fighter bombers. The Battle of the Hochwald Gap enters its third bloody day, and it's a standoff. The Germans won't back down, even though they're outnumbered and under attack by Allied warplanes. Rockets from Typhoon fighter bombers shred the Germans' dwindling supply of tanks.
They were dangerous, these Typhoons, attacking every tank.
The Typhoons swarm the Hochwald Gap, and in the chaos, one of them targets a Canadian tank.
A sound was heard overhead unlike anything I ever experienced in battle. I paused in wonderment, and then heard an explosion.
There's nothing Bill Luton and his tank crew can do but release canisters of yellow smoke to identify themselves as friendly.
Smoke blossomed gloriously on both sides of the tank, and just in time. But no, he kept coming and dove directly at us. I saw a great puff of smoke and instinctively ducked inside. A futile gesture against a rocket. Again came the sound of the express train in a tunnel, and again the explosion. We were still alive to hear it. The Tiffy had missed again.
The Typhoons attack all morning, blunting the German attack. At noon, Canadian tanks push forward in another attempt to clear the Hochwald Gap. But again, they're stopped by German tanks and artillery. That night, tanks from the Canadian Grenadier Guards try again. But the Germans have perfect aiming points on either side of the gap. Tracer rounds light up the sky, and the Guards are caught in a crossfire. By the time it's over, they have gained no ground and lost 10 tanks.
We had the numbers of troops, weapons, and so on our side. But a very well ensconced enemy on the approaches can make you pay dearly, no matter if you have the odds.
Dawn, March 1st. The battle enters its fourth day, and the Canadians are still only halfway through the Hochwald Gap. German tanks and anti-tank guns in the woods on either side of the gap will have to be taken out one by one. That means attacking with tanks through the trees.
Fighting through true forests is an absurdity, just an absolute absurdity. You should never do it. The biggest problem was the Panzerfaust, was the one-shot rockets that they had.
Panzerfaust means tank fist. It's small, highly portable, and lethal. It fires a 140mm shaped charge at ranges of up to 60 meters and can penetrate 200mm of armor, tearing a hole through the tank and unleashing a devastating explosion inside.
He could hide in the wood. All he needed was an opening. He's got a big target, and once he hits that tank, there's a chance he sets off the ammunition in it, or starts the tank on fire, or he has wounded at least one or a couple of the crew.
They'll knock on a tank just like that. Bingo. I don't think tanks are that useful, but that's what you had. We were going through with the Fusiliers Montreal into the forest in daytime. And the 4 tanks were in line ahead, which is not very effective, instead of being spread out. The major of the Fusiliers Montreal wanted us to use HE against this group of Germans in a clearing that was in front of us, which was our objective.
The Sherman 5 carries 2 main types of ordnance: armor-piercing shells for use against tanks, and HE, or high-explosive rounds, for softer targets.
You'd have to be careful and use the shock action more than the weapon. The ground shakes like an earthquake. The Germans were protected. If you brought fire on them, they had overhead cover. And as soon as shelling stopped, they're back into position, throw the sticks and what have you out of the way, and they're ready for business.
The field artillery observation officer, he called in a crumpet 25-pounders. And all of a sudden, they came in and they landed on that clearing. Just the most magnificent shooting. And they just plastered about 10 or 15 rounds right in front of us.
The heavy artillery clears the Germans, and the battle continues for the next 36 hours, with tanks and artillery making small gains against fierce German resistance. Then, on the morning of March 4th, the battlefield is silent. During the night, the Germans have fallen back, leaving the Hochwald Gap for the Canadians. The Shermans advance, and their objective, the village of Xanten on the Rhine River, comes into view. This is where the Germans will make their last stand. For the exhausted and battered Canadians, the fighting is far from over. The Hochwald Gap, a remote patch of farmland in western Germany. In February 1945, this was the scene of one of Canada's most brutal and costly battles of the Second World War. After 5 days of fighting, the battle comes to a swift and surprising end. German forces retreat in the night, leaving the gap and the woods on either side to the Canadians.
This is an art that the Germans have, and we should really basically learn by it, because they have a habit of putting on a tremendous show so that the last thing you can think of is they're withdrawing. But that's what they do, but they leave